BC is not a very good business model.
And whether this is a reaction to the lack of audience and the continuing diminishing audience or not, what we're seeing is decisions being made to let some of these people go. But the attitude, whether it's some of these federal employees that are going out on outfits like CNN, or the Joy Reids, and not just Joy Reid, but her colleagues, for example, Rachel Maddow and these others, they act as if these people are just absolutely 100% entitled to these jobs, and nothing else matters. Effectiveness doesn't matter. Worthiness doesn't matter. Whether they do a good job makes no difference. Merit is completely irrelevant to them because, of course, as we know, they claim that merit is some sort of white privilege deal. And this attitude of how dare you? How dare you? Who are you to no longer want me in this particular position? Who are you to demand that I explain what I do at work? I mean, this reaction, I've got some fantastic audio on CNN. Scott Jennings almost flummoxed over, like, what is so outrageous about getting an email asking what it is that you do? Like, what'd you do last week in your job? And you really see this attitude of entitlement. Why should I have to explain that? Well, because you're the employee. You're the employee. You're being asked by the person above you what it is that you do. What did you do last week? This is perfectly normal in the real world. When you have somebody, particularly if it's someone new that is coming in, whether it's a CEO or general manager, whatever the position is, and they especially if there are real problems with the way things are being run, you want to get a full evaluation. If this were a scenario in which these people weren't to ask what they did, and then they were let go, we would hear screaming about how they didn't even know what I did. They didn't even take time to ask me what I did. All right, what do? I don't have to tell you what I do. Who are you? You're not my boss. Well, Elon Musk is acting on behalf of your boss, the President of the United States. This entitlement, this spoiled, self-centered entitlement. And incidentally, that doesn't mean that if you are upset or worried or scared that you're going to lose your job, that means you're entitled. Any normal human being, unless you're independently wealthy, which odds are if you are, you're probably not going to be working in one of these jobs. Any normal human being, particularly a human being that has a family or maybe lives paycheck to paycheck because they choose not to save, it's a frightening thing. Nobody wants to lose their job. Unless it's some rare circumstance in which they want to get fired, but that's not what we're talking about here. There's a difference, however, between not wanting to lose your job, being concerned about losing your job, and having this attitude that it is just egregious and outrageous if you were to lose your job, that it is some sort of immoral attack on you personally because you are entitled to that job. You're not. President of France meeting with Trump. We've got some audio there. Boy, it's really got to kill these lefties when you get these presidents of other countries that the left wants you to believe hate Trump, think Trump is running this world into the ground, and then they come out and they're like, no, we can work together. This is fantastic. Trump's doing great. Also sat down with Brett Baer, was asked about Trump once again pushing for NATO allies to financially kick in a little bit more. You know what the president of France says? Yeah, your president's right. We do need to do that. Ooh, that's got to sting. Ooh, that's got to sting. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447 KSGF. Weather in a moment. Right now, latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Color 10, Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 69. Tonight, cloudy with a low around 44. For your Wednesday, we'll see a 30% chance of showers in the afternoon and then mostly cloudy with a high near 59. And looking ahead to Thursday, sunny skies with a high near 58.
You know, this story that he just mentioned there about the vote to start towing vehicles that have expired registration and so forth. And a lot of people who are opposed to it are like, I was going to target poor people. But I don't know the ins and outs, but it sounds as if this isn't like a first-time deal where, oh, look, here's a vehicle with a plate that's expired or it has dealer tags on it that, are no longer valid. Let's just go ahead and tow the vehicle. It sounds as if this is specifically for people who over and over and over again have been ticketed, but they just ignore it, and it's about towing for that particular purpose. But for those who may say, well, why is it that of all the things to worry about, the answer's in the story. 70% of that story that he just gave was the city talking about how much money they are losing out on. that these different fees that people in America have to pay for the right, quote right, in order to drive their own transportation. It's just another way to get money out of us, and that's always the key. That's how you can really make sure government is going to get on top of something. The minute they start losing money on it, that's when they have a real problem. If it's private industry, if it's you as an individual, they'll nickel and dime you to death. Oh yeah, I mean, that's just another tax increase, another fee, another levy. Man, the minute though they start seeing that their money's slipping away, we got to get on top of that. That's the motivation behind it. Springfield's Talk 104.1. Did you do weather?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's right. My head was a little foggy
Just
today.
take a break.
Just take a break. We got a traffic update. I'm Nick Reed. Scott Jennings on CNN, in the outrage of the Elon Musk emails that went out. Now, these were emails that were sent out. I believe it was on Saturday. Elon Musk loves to work on weekends because no one else is, and he's talked about this, particularly in government, how easy it is to get things done when there aren't people blocking you and obstructing you because they don't come into work on the weekends. And he had sent out an email to all of these federal employees saying, hey, just give me a rundown of what it is that you did in your capacity as an employee, what you did last week, what were your duties, what were your tasks, what did you do? And this was met with a great deal of outrage. Then there were reports that some departments were saying don't do it. And this, of course, was presented as being an act of defiance. And while in some cases it may be, as Trump explained yesterday, that, well, listen, it makes sense. And you even had, I think, Kash Patel in particular, and it may have been Kristi Noem, that had noted that, hey, telling the employees just hold on a second because there may be some of you that we need to go through and make sure that what information you are providing isn't information that needs to, perhaps be kept non-public. It doesn't need to be out there, personnel issues or whatever the situation is, which is understandable. And Trump noted that, and this is what happens, particularly when you have new people in charge and things are done a certain way. And you say, here's what we need done. And they're like, okay, we understand, but we've got to maybe maneuver in a couple of different ways in order to make this happen. So it's, it isn't some giant battle, though those battles clearly are there within a number of these different divisions. But when you hear Kash Patel and some of these others that are saying, well, hold off just a second, it's not in defiance, it's just making sure that things are done properly. Which, of course, runs counter to the narrative that the left is putting out there, that these are all people who have no idea what they're doing. They're all just willy-nilly throwing around information. It's total confusion and chaos, that the hold back until we figure out the best way to do this is an attempt by adults who are put in charge of these divisions to comply in a manner that is proper. That aside, the sense and the projection of total and complete entitlement, as if these people act as if they're not employees at all. A lot of them. Obviously, and I know some, I have friends that that work for the government in probably every level, from down to the smallest municipality all the way up to the federal government. Not every person who works for the federal government is somebody who or for government at all, is somebody who feels totally and completely entitled. They're not all narcissists. However, those are the ones that you hear about because those are the ones that go to social media in order to scream and cry and this is the entitlement and narcissism. They do that because in their minds, everyone is going to agree with them. That's why they're doing it. They feel as if they are martyrs, that they are being crucified, that this is the single greatest injustice that the world has seen in some time, that they are victims who have done nothing wrong whatsoever. And so they go to social media, they go to CNN and MSNBC in order to make sure you understand what is going on. And so that's, along with the media seeking out these people, it can easily make one think, geez, everybody that works for the government is a real piece of work. That's obviously not the case. But for those that are, here's a discussion on CNN with a number of CNN lefties, and then the one normal person, Scott Jennings, about this request for emails asking employees, hey, just run down what you did last week.
It's abusive. It's abusive.
Yes,
to get an email?
I do think that. I think the way that they are. Yeah, I think the way that they are treating them.
Why? How is this abusive?
Scott, have you ever gotten an email from someone that said, you better do this or else you're going to resign?
Yeah, it's called having a boss in the private sector.
From someone who's not your boss?
The White House is every federal worker's boss. That's number one.
Elon Musk is not anybody's boss.
Scott, how is Elon going to evaluate? I mean, how is he going to evaluate the work of thousands of federal employees when he has no idea what
he's
they do?
Not. The test was, are you even paying attention to your email? Are you even at your terminal?
Some federal workers, he sent it on a weekend. Some federal workers do not have access to their emails on the weekends. They just don't.
Did they go to work today? I mean, look, the amount of outrage, melting down, and sort of outpouring of emotion over this ought to tell you everything you need to know. We had a lady on CNN today, a supposed federal worker, who said she was infuriated by getting this email. She had time to go on CNN, but she didn't have time to send a 30-second email saying, well, here's what I was working on last week. This is what people in the private sector have come to hate about how they view the public sector. And I think there's a great many very dedicated public servants. But you said, it's about control. Yes, it's about control, and it's about finding out who is actually at their job working and who isn't, and do we need all these people?
All right, now a couple of things here that you heard in the relatively chaotic exchange, and I love these questions. Scott, have you ever gotten an email from somebody telling you you'd better do this or that at work, otherwise, or else, you might lose your job? And his response, if you couldn't hear it because of the over-talking, was, yeah, my boss. I mean, this is how it works. You get hired to do a job, and you get told, here's what you need to do. And if you choose not to do it, at some point you lose your job. This is not a difficult concept for people in the real world. I say the real world, the non-governmental world. But apparently, and I'm going to isolate this to people primarily on the left, because, and it isn't so much a government employee thing as much as it is a left-wing mindset thing. The reason it's prevalent here, again, because of the focus by the media in order to show all of the victims in Trump's maniacal chainsaw-wielding ways. And so they seek these people out. But also, yes, there does tend to be a disproportionately high number of left-wing ideology within employees that are in government. But I'm telling you, left-wingers in the private sector have this same sort of attitude. Who are you to tell me what to do? Your expectations are unrealistic. Well, go somewhere else then. You don't have to have this job. If it is so horrible, it's so awful, find a job somewhere else. Given how incredibly talented and wonderful and valuable you feel you are, you should not have trouble finding a job elsewhere. Go get a job somewhere else. If you hate your boss that much, if you hate the mission, if you hate the new direction, go find a job elsewhere. That's called you being an adult. Well, it's just not that easy. Well, this is where an adult makes a decision. Do I just buck it up and go into a job in which I don't like the boss? Guess what? Lots of people do that. That's called being an adult. The world is not some fantasy land in which it is all crafted in order to make sure that you get to live this lifelong fantasy camp world where everything for you is exactly the way that you want it. The world does not revolve around you. This attitude is the result of the participation ribbon, the result of parents never wanting to tell the children that they're wrong, the results of giving praise where it is unearned. When I first realized, I actually saw the real life impact that coddling a person has. It was in one of the first few seasons of American Idol. This is how far back it was. And they began to show and they did it in order to get people to talk and to watch the show. They really didn't often have mediocre performances during the tryouts. There were really good tryouts, and then there were these just horrifically bad tryouts. And because they recognized people like to see both of these things. And what you began to see are some, not all, but some of the individuals that clearly were horrible. Horrible. And they were not only shocked to be told that by the judges, they were defiant. So much so, it was easy to believe that it was just all made up. It was all for show, that these people were just trying to get attention. But you would see them then go out into the hallway, break down crying, while their parents told them they have no idea what they're talking about. They'll be sorry when you're a superstar. And they clearly were horrible. But they felt entitled. They were supposed to go to Hollywood. They were a superstar because that's what they had been told. And many of us used to talk about, well, wait until these people get into the real world. They're going to have a real surprise. That's who these people are. That's who these now adults are. And some of them in positions of leadership. I'm wonderful. I'm incredible. Who are you to tell me? You don't know what you're talking about. I mean, as if Joy Reid didn't display that yesterday, breaking down crying because she got fired from MSNBC, as if she somehow was really raking in the ratings for that network. Going to take a break. The Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447 KSGF. I'm Nick Reed. $10 a.m. Friday, KSGF.com, local for less Ozark, Five Guys, $15 will get you a $30 gift certificate. And while you are at KSGF.com, of course, you don't have to wait until 10 a.m. Friday for this. Get registered for your chance to win tickets to see Alabama live at Thunder Ridge Nature Arena. That'll be Sunday, May 25th. You can sign up for that now at KSGF.com. A traffic update.
Springfield's Talk 104.1, your first alert forecast from Color 10, Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 69. Tonight, cloudy with a low around 44. For your Wednesday, we'll see a 30% chance of showers in the afternoon and then mostly cloudy with a high near 59. And looking ahead to Thursday, sunny skies with a high near 58.
Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. Nick, do these people never have to do an evaluation of their work? Do they never have an employee review with their boss? This is crazy. I have to review with my boss every 6 months of my work. Largely, apparently the answer is no, or at least not in any meaningful way. Again, here's what I believe probably is happening. I believe that this is working against those who do not want more efficient government. Because the more that these people, like you've got this baseline, I think, of individuals that do feel sympathetic at somebody losing their job. That's not a fun thing. It can be very scary, particularly if you do not financially plan for those unforeseen circumstances. It's a situation, by the way, many normal people have been in before. I've been in that situation twice, in which just changes in programming occurred, and bam, like that. It's the thing about this industry. You don't even have to do anything wrong. They just change the items on the menu. They change the theme of the restaurant. They're just like, you know what? We're not going to do this anymore, so everyone's gone. Just like that. By the way, in radio, at least the experiences that I've had specifically, there's no, oh, we'll pay you till September. None of that occurs. I believe the louder that some of these people scream and the things that they are screaming over, the less sympathetic a lot of Americans are going to be. Because when you'll have people that are sympathetic again, but whenever they hear people that are just refusing to even say what they do in an email, when the executive branch says, we need to know what it is that what you did last week. Just give us an idea of what your work looks like on a weekly basis. And they just refuse to do it. A lot of Americans hear that and like, well, now wait a minute here. Because we know what would happen to us if we were told, hey, this comes from up top. You need to just give us a rundown of your job description. Tell us what, and if people in the private sector are like, no, I'm not going to do it, and then went on social media to scream and yell about how their boss is expecting them to do this, we would know what would happen to us. We would lose our jobs. We would, maybe there'd be some first step verbal warning, and then you go through the disciplinary steps. But ultimately, that's the world that so many of us live in. And when they see and hear these people, or hear lefties on CNN decrying requests from an employer to just know what, or a boss, I should say, to just say, what is it that you do, that we're like, if that is too great of an expectation, if that's considered unrealistic and unreasonable rather, then what is considered reasonable? If it is over the line to expect an employee to be able to identify what it is that they do in their job, then what isn't over the line? Not to mention this squalling over having to actually come into work. And this is for a lot of Americans, I'm not sure if you've ever seen any of these sorts of videos that go viral where some spoiled little princess turns 16 years old and she gets a brand new Mercedes for her birthday, and she pitches a fit because of the color. And that video goes viral because most people are like, how ungrateful can you be? How unrealistic are you? I mean, do you not realize this privilege? And some, again, I want to differentiate between just the normal and normal fear of losing a job versus this princess entitled, out of touch attitude of privilege that the government has created for so many of their employees, that I should be able to do what I want. I shouldn't be held accountable to anyone. I shouldn't even have to justify what I do. In my time here, we've been owned by a number of different companies, and every company operates in a different manner. But one of the companies that operate is every single week, everyone who ran a radio station or ran a department had to list the things that they did throughout the week that were meaningful. And it wasn't, by the way, just to make sure that you're doing something. It was so that the person in charge knew what was going on. That's kind of a responsible thing for a person who's running a business to do. In that exchange on CNN, all of those panelists against Scott Jennings, who was like, I don't understand what's so unreasonable about this. And one of the panelists said, well, this is just about controlling things. Yeah, it is. When you are hired for any job, your job is to control what is going on with the business. If you are hired as a general manager for a restaurant, if you're hired to be, the manager at Captain D's, your job is to be in control of Captain D's. The results are your responsibility. So yes, a person who is in charge of controlling things. Or you can use the term managing things if you want. The term manager in and of itself is the definition of managing, of controlling things. Two other things on all this outrage. They keep throwing out, Musk isn't their boss. Who is he? Well, he's working on behalf of their boss, the President of the United States. But again, for people who don't understand how this concept works, let me just give you illustrations. We have, for example, within our building, a promotions director. Now, he's not my boss. But in any given time, he will send out an email to people who are in charge of stations saying, hey, I need a list of what sort of promotional items you need. Or, hey, I need an updated list on promotions that you are going to plan on doing for the next year, and any promotions that you've done in the past that you are no longer going to do. Now, he's not my boss. But this is part of his authority as he was hired in order to run promotions by the person who is my boss. So that gives him authority to direct this, to say, here are the things that I need. Now, if I don't do it, if I'm like, no, I refuse to comply, he also doesn't have the ability to fire me or to get rid of me, but you know who does? The person who hired him. Same thing with Trump and Musk. Yes, Musk is not their boss, but he has been hired on behalf of their boss in order to take care of certain tasks, and this is part of it. And finally, for the people out there, it's just amazing all of this sudden how people are concerned about individuals losing their jobs. And I don't mind people having a sympathetic way about them, but it's when it's inconsistent that it makes me wonder, are you really genuine in this? When you had, every election cycle in modern history, Democrats have talked about putting people in traditional energy industries out of business. They didn't deny it. We played the audio last week or the week before of Joe Biden, just almost in a condescending way. He did the, come on, man. These people can learn to program computers. If your job's eliminated because the government is shutting down the coal plant in which you work, or some other industry, just go learn to program, learn to code.
Do you think these same people also were crying when people were losing their jobs over the COVID mandate?
No. Well, yeah. I mean, that's where were these people? Well, that's different. See, it's always different. No, the difference is this is Trump. When Clinton declared that the era of big government is over, where were you to complain about these jobs? Where were you whenever the first 24 hours of the Biden administration, he eliminates all of those jobs that were associated with the Keystone Pipeline? Where was this grave concern? Where were the interviews on TV with these people that were talking about how concerned they were about how they were going to feed their family and losing health insurance? Don't pretend as if, it's about the people. Really? Because it hasn't been for a long time. I remember when there were all the reports about people having to lose their jobs because of Obamacare, the initial financial burden of Obamacare, and so businesses had to cut jobs. And you had Democrats running around talking about how actually this was a good thing because it was going to give people more time. I kid you not. I think it was Nancy Pelosi who said to take on hobbies. That actually some people, they work too much, and losing your job will be an opportunity to maybe take a night course somewhere or to take up painting. Oh, it's wonderful. It's an opportunity to get away from the grinding day-to-day work. They actually, when the job losses were attributed to them, found a way to talk about how great it was. Oh, but now all of a sudden, I don't take joy in people losing their job. Now, I take joy in finally people in charge doing what it is that they said they were going to do. Everybody who's ever run for president, everybody who ever gets into office in the modern era and runs for Congress, they all say the exact same thing. Going to get rid of waste. Going to get rid of fraud. None of them ever do it. Never do it. So I am happy about the fact that this is occurring. I'm not happy about the fact that over time people have been put into positions that are now it's a necessity that these jobs are taken away. Otherwise, you think you're concerned about people losing their government jobs now? Wait 15, 20, 30 years. Wait until there is such a massive collapse that these cuts are little tiny scalpel cuts in comparison. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Streaming live, KSGF.com. We do have a Heroes Breakfast coming up Friday. At Scramblers, if you are a veteran, come by and get that free breakfast. Let's see. I want to... let's put that in the queue here. I'm trying to sort some of these emails so I can read through them for you. The Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447-KSGF. Didn't about 14,000 lose their jobs when Biden shut down the petroleum industry? Dang it, you beat me to it. I'm a slow texter. I must have been texting that right as I'd mentioned that. Yeah, where were the grave concerns then? Now, I do believe that there are some people that feel sympathy for these lost jobs, and it isn't a pick and choose based off, well, now they're upset because Trump, but because the media is now making a big deal out of it. So whenever all of the energy sector jobs are eliminated, or jobs were eliminated because of the financial burden of Obamacare, or the 14,000 or however many that ended up losing their jobs because just the stroke of a pen, executive order by Biden, that most people just, the media wasn't portraying it. They weren't creating this sense of outrage and sympathy. They weren't finding the most sad story that they could find and interviewing that person about how they didn't know how they were going to pay their rent, and how one of their kids had asthma and another one had some other sort of disease, and now their health insurance was going to go away and they didn't know what they were going to do. So when the media doesn't do that, average people who aren't necessarily paying attention day to day to these things, they don't know that stuff is going on. But for those on the left, this is another example of they don't care about any issue unless it's an issue they can use against their political opposition. And when it comes to job losses, when it comes to people losing their jobs, be it because of Obamacare or because of corporate tax increases or because of Keystone Pipeline cancellations or coal industries being shut down, they can't use that to hurt their political opposition, so they don't care about it. It's meaningless to them. But when it comes to cutting out waste and fraud in the federal government, or just making things even more, when I say waste, that could mean, do we really need this institution to be this big? Do we even need this institution over here? Will life go on without it? We actually don't need it. I mean, for Pete's sakes, people, every time there's a government shutdown, what are we told? Well, the essential workers will continue to work. It's the non-essential workers who don't. If that right there isn't a defining line as to government that we don't actually need versus a government that at least arguably we do, I mean, that to me is a fantastic starting point. But whenever we start looking at scaling some of that back, all of a sudden people on the left are so concerned about these jobs. They're not concerned about their jobs. They're just once again utilizing an issue as a political weapon against Trump. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Pyramid Roofing Company, talk and text line. Brandon on KY3 just told us how Trump is going to cut NOAA. And he won't be able to tell us when a tornado leaves Tulsa headed for us. We will no longer now be able to track weather because of Trump. Now, I didn't see exactly what he did say, but this is what happens. And honestly, sometimes it is because it is the information that they are fed, that you have people that are in industries that will take advantage of information that is funded by taxpayers. And they get told, because they want that fear to trickle down. So they will tell the people that are recipients of whatever information they provide, this is going to go away. You don't know how awful this is, because they want those people to get out there and start, the doom and gloom. And I just find it very, very hard to believe that now if a tornado is coming from Tulsa, we will not know it. Somehow, because of Doge cuts, we will not. There will be no way for us to learn that a tornado that is leaving Tulsa is making its way here, which usually the path of a tornado doesn't seem to last that long, but I'm not a meteorologist. News in 60 seconds. I'm Nick Reed. Springfield's Talk 104.1, and I am Nick Reed. Welcome to the show. The Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447 KSGF. How about seeing Alabama live, Thunder Ridge Nature Arena, Sunday, May 25th? You can register for your chance to win tickets by going to KSGF.com. A Virginia Democrat slamming Doge fans, comparing job cuts to the Holocaust. First, they came for the Jews. Now, this, again, is where the Democrats, they screw things up. And it just talk a messaging perspective. You're going to have a segment of the population that naturally feels sympathetic for people losing their jobs. But when they start screaming about it's unreasonable to expect me to define what I do, it's unreasonable to expect me to come into the office, and you have these comparisons to, essentially if you are not sympathetic or if you don't support every one of these jobs being kept, you're no different than a Nazi who put Jews in the train cars and shipped them off to concentration camps to be gassed. You kind of lose people a little bit. Virginia state delegate comparing Doge cuts to the Holocaust that's a new approach, isn't it? Comparing political opposition to Hitler, to Nazis, to the Holocaust. I mean, the Democrats need something else catastrophic to occur to humanity to start comparing Republicans and Trump supporters to, because at this point, I think they are beginning to really water down the atrocities of Hitler by comparing everything under the sun to Hitler and to the Holocaust. State Delegate Joshua Cole, Democrat Fredericksburg, a famous Holocaust-related quote from a Reformed German clergyman who once identified with the Nazi Party, and most of us are familiar with that story / poem that was written. And you've got let's see, what was his quote? It reminds me of a quote from a long time ago that said, "At first they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't Jewish. Then they came for the trade unions. I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up because everyone had been taken." Now, this 1946, what was described as a confession by the Reverend Martin Niemöller, was a self-reflection, and it was, as he would speak about and write about at the time, grappling, just give you a little bit of history here, with trying to rationalize why it was that he and other people that otherwise were good people, didn't do anything whenever they started cracking down on people, whenever they started coming for people, and it was because it wasn't him. It's sort of like, to give a better comparison and actual apples to apples, people who were anti-Trump, who were Biden supporters, that supported rounding up people that didn't do anything violent, didn't commit any vandalism, but just walked into the Capitol, but they still supported them being thrown in a Washington, D.C. jail for years at a time without any sort of trial, and they were fine with that because it wasn't them. Well, those are just Trump supporters. And what the Reverend Martin Niemöller reflected upon was that there really was no rationalization. There was no excuse. It was simply wrong. That when government comes after your political opposition, to support it or to do nothing, simply because it isn't you. It's not your category of people. To compare the willingness of human beings to walk by concentration camps in which the smokestacks were pumping out the ashes of primarily Jewish people, including children, that the average person in Germany had no trouble whatsoever reporting on some family that might be hiding Jewish people in their attic or elsewhere. To compare that to Americans who believe that there is waste in government and there needs to be some accountability for that is twisted, for one, it waters down and it downplays what actually happened during the Holocaust, and it works against their cause because normal people hear this sort of thing and they're like, you know what? I don't know. I'm beginning to believe that the people who are most upset about this are very unreasonable. And if they're unreasonable about their perception of what is going on with Donald Trump, then maybe their perspective is also unreasonable as well. Weather in just a moment. Right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 69. Tonight cloudy with a low around 44. For your Wednesday, we'll see a 30% chance of showers in the afternoon and then mostly cloudy with a high near 59. And looking ahead to Thursday, sunny skies with a high near 58.
There was interesting exchange, I suppose, on MSNBC, and it was regarding the legal challenges to Doge and the coverage of many of these legal challenges. And you see these headlines, oh, huge setback for Trump, huge setback for Elon Musk, huge setback for Doge. And the MSNBC legal analyst, Danny Cavalos, was on one of the MSNBC panels, and he was almost in a frustrated way trying to explain to them that look, folks, these are not losses for Trump. That none of this is about the merits of the case. Now, the real fun part of it is the actual visuals. You would think that by the looks on the faces of these MSNBC panelists, this legal analyst was telling them that close family members had just been diagnosed with some sort of incurable disease. I mean, they just look absolutely devastated at this. I believe part of the reason that he's frustrated is, as a legal analyst for MSNBC, he recognizes that part of what MSNBC has done very poorly as a network is continue to promise the end of Trump, just over the years. All of these, Trump's going to go to prison. Rachel Maddow with the big announcement about Trump's tax releases. And of course, it turned out that he paid all of his taxes. And Trump can never win. Kamala's going to win in a landslide. And much of the decline in viewership is because their support base continued to get their hopes worked up, only to find out that the people who were making all these promises about all these things that were going to happen just simply were not true. They don't come to fruition. And I think that you hear some of that frustration in the MSNBC's legal analysts here explaining to them that all of these reports that we're putting out there about this is the end of Doge for Trump, this is awful for Trump, this is not accurate information. Here he is trying to explain that to his fellow MSNBC panelists.
Over the weekend, I read all these headlines, and the headlines were like, Trump suffers legal blows. Another one was Trump get hit with unexpected loss. Here was one, major DEI legal setback. And I think the concern I have is that people watching those headlines, especially people who don't like Trump, are going to think Trump is getting his butt kicked. Mm-hmm. And then when he wins, invariably, he's going to win some of these cases. They're going to say, well, what happened to all the butt kicking, right? Yeah. And here's why. These are not major setbacks. First reason, we are at the stay stage. In other words, in almost all of these cases, the court is issuing a stay. That is a pause. By definition, it is not on the merits. Nobody's winning or losing on the merits. They're hitting the pause button until they can decide the case on the merits. And by the way, just like Danielle said, all of this is exhibition games or friendlies, as they say in soccer. Yeah. They don't count. They don't count until they get to the last court they get to, which in most cases, because they're of unique constitutional issues, is going to be the Supreme Court. So these are not blows to the Trump administration. I don't see them that way. The other thing, and again, Danielle brought this up, the Trump administration totally expects they're going to lose in court a lot. Do you know what it costs to do an executive order? A piece of paper and a Sharpie.
He goes on and gives some other examples of where it is that the media is misportraying the temperature of all of this, and just the looks on their faces of grave disappointment, because it is an example or a future in which he's describing Trump is going to win some of this stuff. And like everything else, they don't really care about the particular issues. Is Trump going to lose? They just that's all that matters to them. And this network is just filled with individuals, and you see it on their faces as this legal analyst is trying to explain this to them. I mean, it's as if there's some other terrorist attack that just occurred, and he's given a body count update. It's a real interesting human reaction you see from the left when it comes to these things that they claim Trump is wanting to do that is so horrible and so awful. But when they find out that, in fact, he is able to do it or he's not going to do it, they're actually disappointed. Now, for those that portray themselves as being so concerned that, Trump he's breaking the law, right? This is what that they say. Well, he's breaking the law. He's not following the law. He's just going to ignore these judgments. Now, if their concern really truly was that through Doge, for example, Trump was breaking the law, if that was ultimately their concern, finding out in an opinion of the court, which will ultimately probably be the Supreme Court, that he was not violating the law, They should be happy, right? Because their main concern in that particular context is that here he is, he's lawless. And so if that's your concern and you find out he wasn't being lawless, you'd think they'd be like, oh, well, good, I'm glad. But they're not. You see, the left wants things to be bad. Anytime there is an accusation against Trump that they portray themselves as being so worried about, because this will be absolutely horrible and awful. When they find out it's not true, they don't ever say, thank goodness I'm relieved. They're disappointed because it wasn't true, because the accusation wasn't true. I mean, there are just a tremendous number of different examples out there, but, you can use any sort of, okay, give the example. During the campaign, what was it that they said about Trump and IVF? Trump was going to ban IVF treatment. That this was going to be horrible. You have all of these families across the United States so desperately want to start a family, but Donald Trump is going to ban that from occurring. And they claim that this was very worrisome to them. Yet just last week, he signs an executive order to make it more affordable and more accessible. Now, do you think those people, particularly on the left, specifically on the left, who during the election cycle claimed that they were horrified and so scared that they weren't going to be able to start families because Trump was going to ban IVF treatment, do you think that all of a sudden they were so relieved and so happy that they were wrong? I guarantee you the vast majority of them were not happy and relieved. They were disappointed that they were wrong that Trump didn't ban it. And if that's your reaction as well to what you believe are all of these horrible things that Trump is going to do, and then when you find out that it actually isn't true, if you find that you are like, oh, you're not happy, then that is a moment of self-check in which you need to ask yourself, what are you really focused on? What really is your priority here? Is it that particular issue, or is it just having yet another reason that you can make a post on social media to tell everyone how bad Donald Trump is? Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Ethics watchdog flags Senator helping wife rake in millions for a nonprofit. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat, Rhode Island, being accused of violating ethics rules after backing laws that financially benefited his wife's environmental organization. The Democratic senator and climate hawk voted for key laws that provided funding for grants to the environmental nonprofit group that works with his wife, Sandra Whitehouse, and pays her through a consulting firm. The ethics watchdog Foundation for Accountability and Civics Trust, known as FACT, was asking the Senate Select Committee on Ethics Chairman James Lankford of Oklahoma and Vice Chair Chris Coons of Delaware to investigate Whitehouse, quote, to determine whether he violated the Senate ethics rules on conflict of interest. The group works primarily to draw attention to potential Democratic lawmaker ethics violations. Whitehouse's wife, Sandra, is employed as president of consulting firm Ocean Wonks, LLC, and has been since 2017 per her LinkedIn page. Before that, she was a direct employee of Ocean Conservancy, serving as senior policy advisor beginning in 2008. That organization receiving more than $14.2 million in federal grants since 2008 per U.S. spending.gov. During 2024 alone, it was given two sizable grants, one for $5.2 million from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration for marine debris cleanup in September, and another $1.7 million from the EPA, again, to assist with marine debris cleanup. And so this is, one of these situations in which he's voting for grants that will specifically funnel some dollars to his wife's pocket, which, of course, is his bank account as well. Poor Sheldon Whitehouse, he apparently didn't recognize that in situations like that, you're supposed to use USAID in order to undercover funnel that sort of money for your own personal interest. Cashing in, Biden's energy secretary landing a cushy gig at major utility that her agency boosted with taxpayer cash. This is former Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm, joining the board of a major U.S. utility company that received millions and millions of taxpayer dollars from Granholm's agency on her watch. She will be a board member for Edison International, a major utility holding company, and she'll sit on the board for Southern California Edison, a subsidiary of the holding company. Edison International announced on Thursday SCE, part of a group of California-based entities that received $600 million in taxpayer cash from the Department of Energy under Granholm's direction. Michael Chamberlain, executive director of Protect the Public Trust, told the Daily Caller News Foundation, though they promised us something far different, the Biden administration revolving door looks to be still whirring fast enough to power a major city. Yes, this brings me back to not long ago when Elizabeth Warren in the Senate, during a confirmation hearing, I believe it was RFK Jr., if not, it was one of the other nominees, she was demanding a commitment that once he left the White House position in which he was nominated, that he would pledge to not accept any positions on any boards that would have any sort of relation to health or pharmaceuticals or anything to do with HHS in any capacity. And Elizabeth Warren went on and on about how corrupt that sort of thing was and how it was just incumbent upon her to make sure, in her capacity of advise and consent as a U.S. Senator, that she got commitments to make sure that sort of thing didn't happen. I wonder if she'll have anything to say about her buddy, Jennifer Granholm, getting that cushy job after the agency that she presided over funneled hundreds of millions of dollars its way. I suspect that she won't because, like everything else again, corruption is nothing of interest to the left unless they can use it as a weapon against their political opposition.
Springfield's Talk 104.1, your first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 69. Tonight, cloudy with a low around 44. For your Wednesday, we'll see a 30% chance of showers in the afternoon, and then mostly cloudy with a high near 59. And looking ahead to Thursday, sunny skies with a high near 58.
There was a recent survey conducted by an Illinois-based firm, M3 Strategies, on the popularity of Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, Democrat, who replaced Mayor Beetlejuice. People just outraged at the results of Mayor Beetlejuice and the Democrat policies. So they said, we want change. The problem is, with the left, is they don't ever they don't really change. They don't change approach. They don't change ideology. They don't change party loyalty. They just change the person who has the exact same approach to dealing with problems. And so they don't get fixed. This is why, no matter how outraged they get, and they protest in the streets because of the conditions in whatever blue-run city that they're in, nothing ever changes. For this particular poll, the current mayor, Brandon Johnson, garnered a 6.6% favorability. 6.6%. The survey, again conducted by Illinois-based firm M3 Strategies on February 20th and 21st, found that Johnson is, quote, overwhelmingly unpopular after receiving responses from 696 randomly selected Chicagoans. 79.9% of voters, so 80%, disapprove of Johnson. 6.6% holding a favorable view with a net favorability of negative 73.3%, the survey findings stated. When asked who they would be most likely to lean towards if the mayoral election were held today, only 8.2% of respondents selected Johnson, who entered office in 2023 after unseating former Mayor Beetlejuice. The top three issues selected by respondents, this is Chicago: crime, high taxes, and inflation. Only 11% of respondents listed racism as one of their top issues, and 3% listed LGBTQ rights. Now, to side note this here. This is Chicago. Overwhelmingly Democrat. And when you look at it, only 11% of respondents listed racism as a top priority, 3% LGBTQ rights. This is Chicago. Left-wing city. Is it any wonder that across the nation, Democrats are so unpopular and viewed as so out of touch with the average American, when even in one of their safe havens, where their party never, ever, ever loses, only 3% of the respondents find their top priority to be in line with the Democrat Party? I think it's fair to say, and polling has shown this, when people are asked, what do you view as a top priority for the Democrats? It's almost consistently, transgenderism, LGBTQ issues. So here they are continuing to wave the banner to identify their political party with an issue that even in their own Chicago, only 3% of respondents say is a top priority for them. When asked to describe Johnson in their own words, respondents use terms like incompetent, ineffective, worst, and puppet. Notably, most of the respondents voted for Vice President Harris, 70.9% over Trump, 18% in November. And this goes back to the out-of-touch notion. It's not like we're talking about Trump supporters here or even normal people. Is that 70% of these people voted for Kamala Harris? White respondents made up 43% of the group. Black respondents made up 27%, Hispanic or Latino respondents 18.8%. Others, including Asians, Native Americans, and mixed-race individuals, made up the remainder of the respondents. Okay, now, so here's the kicker. If the next Chicago mayoral election were taking place at the time of the survey, 27% of respondents said that they favored former CEO of Chicago Public Schools and 2023 mayoral candidate Paul Vallis, and 21% favored Illinois Secretary of State Alexi Gianalis. Illinois Comptroller Susan Mendoza came out in front of Johnson with 11.7% in a hypothetical vote. Now, what do all of these other candidates that would beat Mayor Johnson today, if the election were held, have in common? I'm sure you know the answer to this. They're all Democrats. So just as this, it doesn't take any great analyst to recognize this. When Johnson got elected, we talked about the fact that nothing's going to change. He's no different than Mayor Beetlejuice was, and whomever it is in the next election that replaces him will be a Democrat, and nothing will change. Because the approach is not going to change. If the approach were going to change, then the person would not be a Democrat. It's not as if you are, in order to get a different outcome, and I mean, it should seem obvious, but to get a different outcome, you have to take a totally different approach. So if you take the Democrat approach over and over and over again, you are not going to get a different outcome. You're just not going to. By definition, if the approach were different, then it would not be a Democrat approach. It would be a Republican or Libertarian or, whatever the political persuasion was. And this is why I do not believe that the devastating manner in which the Democrats demonstrated their total and complete incompetence in dealing with the fires in Los Angeles, I firmly believe that was not going to change the way people voted. And there was a great discussion publicly, and there were some people in California that said this is going to change it. People I'm talking to, they say they won't vote Democrat again, that they've really realized the problem here, and that's the way things have been run in the state by Gavin Newsom, or the way things have been run in the city by the mayor of Los Angeles, Mayor Bass. And I'm sure that there probably are some individuals that have voted Democrat that when it comes next time, around, that they may vote Republican because of that. But the vast majority will be able to tell themselves that they're voting for something different by voting for a different Democrat without having to acknowledge to themselves that their entire ideology is wrong when it comes to the approach of government and the approach of how to deal with things in government. It's a nice little safe space because it is very, very, very difficult for a person to admit that they've been wrong about something that they have been so adamant about defending. And when it comes to leftist ideology, I think most people would agree, even people on the left, that they are much more emotionally committed to their belief system and their cause, which makes it even more difficult for them to say, I was wrong. And that's why you get in these cities these people that are very entrenched in left-wing ideology that just rotate people that are cut from the same cloth in over and over and over again. Because then they can tell themselves, well, see, I recognize that we needed a change, and I voted for that change when it is not a change. Same thing, same approach, same belief. Which is why these cities have the same problems over and over and over again. I want a great homeloan.com. All of your home loan needs with the Carricker team. Talked with it was Anthony Carricker this past Friday while at Scramblers, and we talked about how it was, I don't know if it's bothersome, but he had noted that when it comes to a buyer looking to get a better deal, right? That's what you do. Somebody has a house, you're like, oh, I wonder if we can get it for less than that. That the go-to strategy is to ask to lower the selling price of the home. So, instead of $320,000, can we get it for $300,000? And he noted that the real meaningful savings can actually come from negotiating other things like closing cost, or have the seller, buy down points, and you can make these long-term differences or even upfront savings, as opposed to having $20,000 stretched over a 30-year loan, which really can come down to pennies when it comes to payments. And a lot of it's just a lack of communication from the realtor when it comes to those particular scenarios and situations. So the point being is, whenever you work with the Carrickers and their team at iwantagreathomeloan.com, you are getting so much more than just someone that, plugs in your information, finds out what different offerings there are for you, and then does all the paperwork along with you, and then they're at the closing, and then that's it. They really do look out for you in terms of all the information available, and make sure that you at least know and are aware of how it is that you can best financially benefit yourself. So for all of your home loan needs, plus so much more, particularly in terms of knowledge, iwantagreathomeloan.com, because you do. Congressman Burleson with us. We just spoke with him last Friday, but he's kind enough to once again check in with us just to give us an update on the latest goings-on. So we won't keep you too terribly long, but we continue to hear all of the grave concerns and the pearl clutching about Doge, and there are, of course, contradictions galore. On one hand, we hear about how, well, of course, some cutting is necessary, but not all this massive cutting. But then they try and downplay the cutting by claiming that it's really not saving that much. They're not cutting that much. All of these contradictions existing. I know that in your area of Washington, in Congress, that there is also the Doge efforts there. Just, if you would, give us an update on how you feel about where things are.
Where I feel is that they're not cutting enough. You've got, I'm on the, I'm probably a little bit more to the right of most people, and more bold to do what needs to be done. We have a $2 trillion a year deficit, so we're adding $2 trillion in debt to our national debt, which is currently $36 trillion. And in order to make that up, what Elon is working towards is the discretionary spending portion of that spend. So of the $7 trillion that we're spending each year, $2 trillion of that is debt. We're bringing in $5 trillion, but of that $7 trillion that we're spending, about $2 trillion is discretionary spending, and discretionary spending is the military, our prisons, the money that we send to the roads and bridges, all the things that you think of when you think of the federal government, what they do. But the real problem is mandatory spending, and that's why, it's great that Elon is doing this, and he's got to keep going. But the more that the difficult part, if we're really going to balance this federal budget, is that we're going to have to address the mandatory spending portion. And mandatory spending is the things that the federal government has locked ourselves into. They through the law, have basically created these blank checks to states and to individuals that we have really no control of the output for. So Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, these are all the biggest, pieces of that mandatory spending. So if you're going to address that, if you're going to really truly get to a place where we are, balanced, you got to touch mandatory spending. And in my opinion, the lowest hanging fruit there is the spending on the is spending on Medicaid.
Yeah. We're talking with Congressman Burleson, and I know we had talked in some detail last Friday about much of this stuff, so I would encourage people, if you want to hear more in-depth understanding about just what we are facing and the challenges that are there, you go back and listen to the podcast from last Friday. But I did want to ask you, because there is a division of government that I've seen you've consistently made postings on and the need to eliminate, and that is ATF. Talk about that, if you would, a bit, because anytime you're talking about eliminating some sort of division of the government, I think that is something that people go, oh, well, that's significant, particularly when it comes to an agency people are familiar with. So your position, what it is you're looking to do with the ATF?
Yeah, I think that it's a duplicative agency, and I'm not alone in that thought. In fact, Bill Clinton and Al Gore in the 90s suggested eliminating the ATF as an agency altogether, and they were right to do so. That was a time when Democrats still had some common sense. But it's a bureaucratic agency. It's a duplicative on the federal level from a lot of things that the FBI has the purview to enforce. So, for example, the FBI is the one, they have explosives under their purview and firearm enforcement. But the ATF kind of stumbles over a lot of that and tries to do its own thing. And they have been a disaster. So you look back throughout history, the ATF is the agency that is responsible for the actions at Ruby Ridge,
right,
where they, entrapped an individual to saw off a shotgun and then went in and raided his property and killed him and his family, or killed many of his family. Sorry, I think he survived. Mm-hmm. And then he sued the federal government, and rightfully so, and got a big award for it. And then the ATF, everybody watched what happened with Waco and the events that happened there.
Yeah.
They could have easily just tried to get a warrant and go talk to David Koresh, who went into the town every day. The FBI agent who was monitoring the scene, watched the whole disaster unfold, warned the ATF not to do what they did. And it ended up being a disaster. Then you had the Fast and Furious scandal. Mm-hmm. Then you had just recently this gentleman in Arkansas who was just shot and killed. So this agency is just, the question is, what are they doing to keep us safe? They passed these unconstitutional gun grab rules, things like the pistol brace ban or the ghost gun rule or the rule to reclassify individuals who are hobbyists or enthusiasts as gun dealers. And then they basically go out on these expeditions to make criminals of law-abiding people, right? People that just want to express their Second Amendment rights, instead of going after people that are actually, the true terrorists and the true shooters. And so it's just an agency that I think, what I'm excited about is the fact that Kash Patel has not, they basically let the director go of the ATF, and he's acting as the acting director. Yeah. It gives me some hope that we might actually see some changes in the administration, and that Kash it gives me a little bit of hope that maybe he's on the same page as me, that we need to dissolve this agency altogether.
Congressman Burleson with us. Before we do let you go, I just want to give you an opportunity if there's anything that you want people to be aware of that's ongoing.
Yeah, I'm continuing to be on the DOGE committee. This week we're going to be talking about all the money that's been sent out to these foreign entities all over the world and these NGOs and everything. So it should be a good hearing.
Excellent. Congressman Burleson, as always, thank you. Appreciate your time. Thanks last Friday at Scrambler, spending so much time with us, and we will talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Thanks.
You bet. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Streaming live, KSGF.com. I see these headlines like Trump's popularity plummets, a historic decline in approval ratings. This is the Daily Digest, and you read through it, and it's kind of difficult to determine, like, where they say, well, it's an aggregate, and, well, analysis from this outlet over here in the UK, and it's really hard to pin down exactly what numbers they're talking about. More specifically, however, a new Harvard CAPS poll, Democrat Party approval hitting a record low at 36%, which is now 15 points lower than the GOP. And 72% of voters support the existence of a U.S. government agency focused on efficiency initiatives, a.k.a. DOGE. Voters want Ukraine to negotiate a settlement with Russia. Stagwell today released the results of the February Harvard CAPS Harris poll, monthly collaboration between the Center of American Political Studies at Harvard and the Harris poll and Harris X. In the first month in office, Trump's approval rating is at 52%, with voters most satisfied with his job on immigration, reducing the cost of government, and returning America to its values. All things that if you listen to the media, you would think the majority of Americans are unhappy with his performance, but in fact, it's the opposite. The majority of voters support Trump's policy on the border, focus on government expenditures, gender, DEI, and offshore drilling. So all of these are issues in which Trump is winning support from the American people. 31% of voters saying that their personal finance situation is already improving under the Biden administration. Trump's favorability, 50%, net favorability, 7 points up. More voters have a favorable rather than an unfavorable view of key cabinet members such as RFK Jr., J.D. Vance, and Tulsi Gabbard. The Democrat Party, though, receiving its lowest approval rating since at least March of 2018, with only 38% of Democrats, 86% of Republicans, and 70% of independents disapproving of the Democrat Party, while 49% of voters approve of the Republican Party, 36% of voters approving of Congress. All of Trump's key policies receiving majority support except for renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. So the only thing, according to the Harvard poll, that he is not winning in the popularity on is that whole changing the name to Gulf of America, which is, of course, meaningless ultimately when it comes to the day-to-day lives of the average American. So despite what the left wants to believe, and you see these headlines in this analysis, James Carville, 30 days, this entire government's going to collapse under Donald Trump. Well, not according to the American people thus far. News in 60 seconds. I'm Nick Reed. Exclusive. Morale low at The View after hosts asked to dial back Trump criticisms, according to sources. The fiery hosts at ABC News The View facing pressure to dial back their anti-President Trump rhetoric, leading to tensions in front of the camera. The Post has learned while behind the scenes morale is low among staffers after layoffs and unpopular cost-cutting moves, multiple sources told the Post. One source close to the show's co-hosts Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, Sarah Haynes, Alyssa Farah Griffin, and Anna Navarro said the fear and loathing is partly because Brian Tetta, executive producer of the daytime Gabfest, spoke to staffers about going easy on Trump-related commentary in the days leading up to the 47th president taking the oath of office. The directive followed an embarrassing moment in November when the co-hosts were forced to issue 4 separate legal notes or disclaimers during a live broadcast while discussing allegations leveled at several of Trump's cabinet nominees. Since then, the outspoken host have been somewhat more careful, with Haynes admitting that she and her fellow panelists are out of touch with a large portion of Americans because none voted for Trump. More recently, Griffin admitted she agreed with some of Trump's policies while trying to convince Goldberg to find a middle ground with Trump supporters. The Post previously reported that post-election, ABC News execs were holding high-level meetings over bringing in conservative voices to balance the drumbeat of negativity towards Trump by the current host. A source close to the show denied the host had been ordered to temper their views. Quote, "No one holds back their opinions on The View," the sources told the Post. "It's a place for dynamic conversations from diverse points of view."
Right. Like conversations, it's just a bunch of women shouting down anyone that has, like, any type of conservative views.
Well, and this is the problem that the people who run these networks have, or these particular shows. They become so one-dimensional. And that lacks appeal for a large segment of the population. It really only appeals to people who just want to be miserable. They want to tune in and be told how bad things are going. They want to tune in to be told how horrible Trump is. They want to tune in and hear about all of the horrible things that Trump is going to do tomorrow and the next day and the next day. They want to hear that stuff. Then if you have somebody in charge of the network that they decide, well, okay, we need to expand this. We need a more diverse perspective. Their way of presenting that is to have one person come on that is somewhat, not even conservative, but not quite as far as to the left, that can at least present maybe a more objective or alternative perspective as to what's going on. But then it just turns into all of the rest of them piling on. It's the diverse perspective is not an introduction into a program like that really offers a diverse perspective for public consumption. It is what the purpose it ends up serving is giving an outlet for all of the anti-Trump people to yell at. It's like a Coliseum scenario where they throw somebody in there for all of the lefties to attack. Well, that doesn't satisfy what it is that they think that they're looking for. Like, well, we need to appeal to a broader base. And so what we're going to do is, in order to get some of those non-anti-Trump people in, which, frankly, I don't think that they actually really want to be part of their audience anyhow, but they do recognize they have to broaden their audience. And so they think if we put a different perspective on there. But when that different perspective is only there just to be beat up upon and yelled upon and name-called and having a giant dog pile on, that isn't going to satisfy that segment of the population that you're wanting to bring in. It'll satisfy that base because there's nothing more they love. I mean, they love hearing Trump beat up on. But if you can bring somebody on to seemingly defend Trump and then they get to directly beat up that person, that satisfies that left-winger even more because they love that. They love the bullying. They love the dog piling. They love the name-calling. It scratches that itch that they have. And it's why these networks, they can't do it. I mean, the problem that the corner they've painted themselves in, and Joe Scarborough experienced this with his show on MSNBC. They have niched themselves into an audience that wants one thing, and that is to feed their hatred of Trump. And in creating that audience, what they've also done is back themselves into a corner because that audience will not accept anything else.
I don't think they would have a show without Trump criticism. It's almost like that's all they know.
And that's all they want.
Yeah.
Well, look at what happened when Joe Scarborough went and just talked with Trump. They went nuts on him. I mean, the next day, what little audience they had dropped significantly because their base that they have isolated themselves to catering towards got really ticked off because they just want the hate. They don't want what they view as humanizing Donald Trump or Donald Trump supporters. And so by lifting their foot off the neck just a little bit, they lose some of what little niche base they have. And at the same time, they're not gaining anything. What happens here is you get this question then, well, okay, then what can they do to fix the problem? I don't think they can fix their problem. If their goal is to expand their audience and to start being a meaningful, profitable place that Americans go in order to learn what's going on and maybe to get a little bit of entertainment and to hear analysis that they I never thought of that before. That's an interesting perspective. They're not going to be able to do that without just completely blowing everything up. They have to realize the only way to do that is lose what little audience they have and start from ground up. And that essentially means the programs in the form that they exist or anything that even resembles it has to go away. And so I think this is one of those situations where there is no answer. They have so painted themselves into a corner. There's absolutely nothing that they can do in order to become relevant as long as there's any even whiff, in whatever new programming they would try to evolve to, having any whiff of what they are today. And yeah, I imagine that morale is low. If they're told, listen, you got to back off of Trump just a little bit, and to Sarah's point, that what they don't know how to do anything else. They are one-dimensional. They're one-trick ponies. This is it. They do not have the ability to stretch beyond that. Springfield's Talk 104.1, latest news update.
In the First Alert forecast from Colorton, Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 69. Tonight, cloudy with a low around 44. For your Wednesday, we'll see a 30% chance of showers in the afternoon and then mostly cloudy with a high near 59. And looking ahead to Thursday, we'll see sunny skies with a high near 58.
Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you, the Pyramid Roofing Company. Woo, it's starting to feel like spring out there, and now is the best time to do an evaluation on your home. You know, check for home repairs, get things scheduled out, and one thing to put on that list is your roof. And I want to recommend my friends over at the Pyramid Roofing Company. Now, the Pyramid team, they offer free roof inspections, and they do a very thorough one at that. They check everything from your vents, your gutters, around your chimney, and they also do an attic inspection and check your decking as well. And they also take tons of photos and videos so you can see exactly what they see. And then they come up with the best solution for you and your home. So whether you need a whole new roof, new gutters, or maybe just a simple roof repair, the Pyramid Roofing Company can get your home ready for spring. You can give Josh a call today, and you can find all of that contact information for the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron vowed to work together on Ukraine. Yes, another friendly world leader event with Donald Trump and a world leader that we're all told hates Donald Trump. And all of this is in defiance of what we have been told was going to occur under Trump, and that is fracturing our allies, that no one would listen to the United States, that these relationships that have been long important to not just the United States but to the rest of the world would fall apart, yet time and time again. What happens when these individuals come to the White House? What happens when these individuals meet with Trump? They come out talking about how important the alliance is and how it is that the global community, or in this case our European allies and NATO specifically, are in recognition of the strength that is provided by President Trump. And let's make one thing very clear. That is clear it should be clear, without even articulating, and that is, prior to Trump becoming president, there was absolutely no movement whatsoever when it comes to ending this war between Ukraine and Russia. None. The answer every single day was more money, more weapons, and more killing, with no end in sight. All of that has fundamentally shifted. If Kamala Harris were president of the United States today, or if Joe Biden were president of the United States today, we would be no closer to these two sides coming together than we were prior to Trump becoming president. And probably it would have gone on year after year after year after year. One of the things I really appreciate about this administration, we're going to play some Marco Rubio audio coming up, is the realistic, or the reality of the fact that, listen, this deal may not be the easiest thing to do, and who knows, what it ultimately takes is Zelensky and Putin making the agreement to that. That is what really matters in the end. And, we can't guarantee that that is going to happen. But we know that we weren't even step one of a million steps, because there was no attempt to do this. That's the thing that is so crazy. It's so crazy about the characterizations of people like Joe Biden and Democrats, and, NATO's so important because it keeps the peace, while Donald Trump is some sort of crazed lunatic that's going to start World War III. When Biden was president, there was no active plan to even end anything. None. No talk of it. There wasn't even an attempt. Think about that. For all the talk that we hear oftentimes about, we just need to do something. We need to try something. They weren't even trying to end this. Trump's approach is 100% the opposite. 100% the opposite. The Democrats' approach under the Biden administration was whatever Zelensky wants in order to keep this thing going, Zelensky gets. And no plan to make it stop. Trump's approach is the exact opposite. We're going to do whatever it takes to make it stop. And amazingly, the European allies are all on board with this thing, which is what Macron expressed. There was an interesting vote at the United Nations about blaming Russia And the United States did not support this resolution. And I can tell you why. Because the Trump administration, in Donald Trump's calculation, believes that doing that would slow us down, or slow the world down, slow this process down of getting these two to come to the table together. Trump has one goal: getting this thing done. Any and every expression that he provides, any and every stance that is taken, officially or unofficially, is for that end. That's it. When you understand that that is the goal, it makes so much of this so much more clear. And I would once again praise Marco Rubio for doing, once again, an absolute tremendous job of articulating this. But first, I want to go back, and we're going to take a break and play some of the Marco Rubio stuff here regarding that vote at the United Nations, because the way, of course, the media is portraying this is, oh, here we go, defending the dictator Putin. Here we go, defending the dictator Putin. To which I can guarantee you the Trump position is, call it what you want. If it makes this thing end faster, then so be it. Because who gives a damn about a UN resolution which is meaningless if it gets in the way of getting an actual peace deal done? This is obviously something that was talked about with the French president. He sat down, Brett Baer of Fox News, and one of the wedges that the anti-Trump people constantly are trying to create when it comes to the relationship with NATO, with our European allies, particularly in the context of Ukraine, is how, Trump has always antagonized NATO and keeps needling these people, saying, hey, if you guys don't contribute more money, if you don't do that, then what's the point? If you're not committed, maybe we shouldn't be either. This was portrayed. Remember, this is another promise that was made by the Democrats during the election, that NATO was in danger of ceasing to exist if Donald Trump got elected president of the United States. So regarding all of that and the commitments that Trump, the bar that he has raised for the European allies, including France, Macron was asked about that.
Wants NATO allies to spend 5% of their GDP on defense. Your country, if you look at the graph, sits at about 2%.
Yeah.
Will you boost defense spending in this environment?
This is what I start. So first, since I was elected in 2017, I passed two laws of planification, and at the end of these two laws, we will have double our budget in France. As you mentioned, we are at 2%. We have to do much more. Your president is right.
But it's a tough economic environment in France.
It is.
I just want to pause this in case you could not understand through his French accent. The words he uttered was, your president is right.
Totally true.
Political environment, your coalition is frayed.
Yes, but what I did, and this is my job, it's to convince a majority of French people and a majority of parties to step up our efforts. And it's not because you ask us to do so and have more burden sharing. This is our interest. And why? And this is important, and this is something you have to realize as well. Because Russia is still a threat. Russia spends 10% of its GDP in defense. And it's close to us. And Russia is aggressive vis-a-vis Europeans. We have every week cyber attacks. We had terrorist attacks. They have a sort of hybrid war vis-a-vis Europeans. So we have to step up our expenditure. So in France, we will deliver increases, additional ones. I'm building consensus, and I will do my job. And the political forces are all very aware of the situation. On top of that, we have to do much more at the European scale. I convene a meeting beginning of this week, and we will have a European Council in the days to come, 6th of March, and we will have some special announcement by the Commission to increase as well short-term financing. And what we have to do, we need innovative financing to have much more common investment as Europeans. Why? Because we have to take our part of the burden, and we have to invest much more in our own security. First, to decrease your own burden, but second, because this is our interest.
Now, the reason I played all that out is his articulation of why it is that he has agreed, as the president of France, to comply with the request of Trump to increase their contribution from 2.5% to 5% to NATO. And that is because he's explaining that, and he even says it's not because Trump says we need to do it. It is because it is in our best interest to do it. That recognition is important because that is the same reason that has been given by Donald Trump all this time, even during his first term. Trump has never been out there saying, well, they need to just because we said so. Ultimately, when it has come down to it, he has always explained it is in their best interest, particularly geographically speaking, that NATO is strengthened and thereby the individual nations within NATO is strengthened when those nations step up and start contributing more. Now, it wasn't specifically the funding of NATO issue, but this is similar to when Trump, he caught a lot of grief from the left when he called out Angela Merkel of Germany during his first term for making this deal with Russia when it comes to their energy and the gas pipeline coming in, telling them you should not be doing this. This is not in your best interest. You are making yourself weak by relying on Russia for energy. Of course, they all laughed and mocked at him until, all of a sudden, Russia reinvaded Ukraine under the Biden administration, and then there was a real problem when it came to energy. So it was a situation in which Trump was right on behalf of the Europeans, looking out for them. And during the last campaign, when this whole discussion of NATO and contributions came up, Trump once again made the argument, not that they need to contribute more just because of the contributions made by the United States to lighten our burden, but because it is for their good. And I think that it is very significant that you have our allies in Europe not just recognizing but articulating that the reason, in this case, Macron is saying we're going to double our contributions to NATO, it's not just because Trump said you need to, but because of the reasons that Trump has explained. It makes for a stronger France, it makes for a stronger NATO, and it makes for a stronger world in terms of world peace. This is what, incidentally, is genuinely called leadership. That you have, through the leadership of Donald Trump, these countries in Europe taking meaningful steps that otherwise they would not have taken. People can say, oh, yes, they would have. But the fact of the matter is it hasn't been until Trump has stepped up this rhetoric and called them out publicly and articulated the benefits of their increased contributions that they actually started doing it. Leadership isn't people doing something simply because you said so, but it is, not that that oftentimes doesn't have to occur, but it's when people follow your lead because they recognize the benefit of it. And that's what was displayed there in that conversation with Brett Baer by the president of France. I do want to play some Marco Rubio audio explaining the reason that the United States did not vote in favor of blaming Russia for the invasion, because he does a tremendous job of laying this out and explaining in a real meaningful way why the U.S. has taken that position. Streaming live, KSGF.com. We do have a Heroes Breakfast coming up on Friday. That, of course, will be Scramblers free breakfast if you're a veteran, for you to come by and get yourself free breakfast 6 to 9. The doors do open at 6 o'clock, of course, and then during the broadcast until 9 o'clock. That is thanks to Delta Roofing, Air Services, Heating, Cooling, Plumbing, Electrical, and Scramblers, in addition to the Warrior's Journey. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. In fact, odds are she will be joining us this upcoming Friday, barring any sort of particular closing or showing with maybe one of you that is necessary. She's pretty good about being able to make it out there every other week to join us. Jim had posted in his experience with Emily Johnson. We contacted Emily about selling our home of 25 years. Emily suggested making some improvements to the house that would increase its value. She was very patient with us throughout the 2 years it took us to complete those improvements. We had many questions. She was always quick to respond. We were selling our home in Springfield and buying a home in Texas. The process went smoothly because Emily took care of the details. We highly recommend Emily. She's knowledgeable, personal, and professional, and that is what you get with Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. KSGF.com. Another reminder that you can get signed up to win tickets to see Alabama live at Thunder Ridge Nature Arena. That concert coming up Sunday, May 25th, and your chance to get registered to win tickets at KSGF.com.
Springfield's Talk 104.1, your first alert forecast from Colorton, Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 69. Tonight, cloudy with a low around 44. For your Wednesday, a 30% chance of showers in the afternoon and then mostly cloudy with a high near 59. And looking ahead to Thursday, we'll see sunny skies with a high near 58.
Rubio ripping UN as antagonistic on Ukraine-Russian resolution after the U.S. voted against a broader resolution which passed the full United Nations. The U.S. later led a narrow resolution calling for an end to the war that did not pass the UN Security Council. This was a measure that essentially, and this is the United Nations, bashing the Russian, that Russia is ultimately responsible for the war in Ukraine. Marco Rubio asked about this in a sit-down interview. Who is this with? Is this Brett Baer? Well, the important thing is the answer that he gives here regarding that vote on the UN and explain it. And by the way, it's a legitimate question. I think these are the things that should be talked about. And I love how this administration is being so transparent with this stuff. And they're being so just straightforward, plain talk. It's not the flowing rhetoric. It's not it's just, it seems so basic and so simple and so straightforward. And when it comes to the legitimate question, why would the U.S. vote against this, Marco Rubio?
Well, on the broader resolution, we think the UN needs to get, if it's going to be useful in the 21st century, the UN needs to get back to its charter mission, which is the prevention and the ending of war and conflict. And so we felt, everyone knows, you can go back and read newspaper articles over the last 3 years and figure out what happened in Ukraine. But now, as the president's made very clear, President Trump wants to end this war. He thinks far too many people have died, and he wants to bring it to an end. So we didn't feel it was conducive, frankly, to have something out there at the UN that's antagonistic against either side. We're trying to get these guys to the table. And unfortunately, Ukraine didn't agree. They wanted to move forward on theirs. We then went to the Security Council with our compromise, which I think is a very fair language, and it basically says war is a terrible thing. I mean, I'm paraphrasing and I'm being simplistic, but it says war is a terrible thing. Way too many people have died. This war needs to end in a way that's enduring. In essence, echoing President Trump's view of what this conflict needs to be, and reminding the United Nations that the purpose of the United Nations was the prevention of war and the ending of conflicts, not making it harder to end conflicts. So I thought it was good that we got it done at the Security Council. The Russians didn't veto it, which is a good sign. I'm not telling you that that is going to end this conflict, and I can't wait till Elise Stefanik is there because it'd be great to have her leadership. But I certainly think our language is better language and hopefully furthers the cause of peace.
Now, to his point there, and I know that this is a theme that I just continue to reiterate, that, and as Rubio did as well, Trump's goal is to end this war. But every single statement that is made, every action that is taken, from either which side, I think it's a legitimate question if you understand what the goal is here, as stated by Rubio and Trump and others. Does this help bring about a peace deal? And whether you agree with the assessment or not, when you understand that is the lens through which this administration views everything, you understand why they take the steps they do. When it comes to the United Nations, deciding that there's going to be a resolution that finger wags at Russia and says, you're at fault for this, is the United States, who is at this point acting as the person to bring both, or the country to bring both sides together. Does it help do that if the United States votes in favor of that, or does it hurt to do that? And I suggest that the Trump administration's perspective on this is that when it comes to being the party that is responsible for bringing the two sides together, voting in favor of that resolution would not help. And because that is their number one goal, that's why they voted against it. By the way, I don't know, frankly, that that's not part of the reason all of this happened in the first place. I think it's a fair question to ask, why would the United Nations, why would this even be brought up in the first place? I mean, let's be honest. This is an entity, the United Nations, that not only gives passes to aggressive behavior by dictators, but rewards them for it. This is an institution that puts North Korea on the head at one point of the Human Rights Commission. There's no country that has worse human rights than North Korea. China has a veto power over things that they are the great aggressors on. They also are oftentimes put in charge of areas of human rights, when China has horrific, they have slavery, for Pete's sakes. They have concentration camps. And the United Nations rewards them by putting them in positions of power. So all of a sudden they decide, well, we're really going to, while we're right there, meaningful steps of bringing the two sides together, and this is when the UN pops up and decides that they want to start shaming Russia. For what purpose? Why? Well, because Russia is run by a dictator. Okay, but why all of a sudden does Russia or does the United Nations seem to have grave concerns about this? And why is it, to Marco Rubio's point, I'm sorry, isn't the UN supposed to be the one doing this stuff? I mean, here, how backwards is this? The whole point of the United Nations is to prevent wars. And while we are, because of the Trump administration, moving the two sides closer to actually ending this war, who is it that decides to stand up and hit the hornet's nest with a stick? The United Nations? That's kind of backwards. I don't know that this all isn't done in order to help portray, like to give a little something to everyone. On one hand, the European allies are able to vote in a manner that satisfies Zelensky's need to make sure the world knows that Putin is the aggressor in this thing, but allowing the United States to do what? Appear neutral. To say, nope, we are going to be the one voice in all of this that is neutral. We're not going to, at this point in the game, given that the United States has shifted from funding the war to now trying to end the war, that means that we have to be neutral. Because if we are going to increase the likelihood that we are able to bring both sides together, clearly we cannot be seen as taking sides. And in order to make sure that we are not seen as taking sides when it comes to voting, playing the blame game here that's not relevant to us right now, you guys go right ahead. We're going to stay out of this one. And I think that there can be an argument made that that's perhaps the whole reason the vote took place to begin with, was to really solidify in place that narrative that the United States is neutral in this at this point for the purposes of bringing Putin and Zelensky both to the table. By the way, the rift that was caused by Zelensky having that conversation with Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance, in which Zelensky said that, yes, he agreed with the concept of the United States having access to the rare earth minerals. This is something that Marco Rubio revealed in a conversation with Catherine Herridge, in which, he and J.D. Vance sat there and Zelensky's like, yeah, that makes total sense. I just need to, run it through a legislative process. And then the next day, Zelensky's running around saying, well, I told the U.S. to kick dirt. I told them no. I think what they did not expect to occur in Ukraine is for Marco Rubio to reveal that. I think that they probably expected the United States would ignore it, just pretend like it didn't happen, because they thought we would be embarrassed. That, here, gosh, we kind of got tricked. Zelensky, one thing, and then he's out there saying this, and that we would be too embarrassed to say, hey, wait a minute here. Zelensky's, he's jerking us around because we want to look like the world leader. We want to look like we're in charge of this. And I suspect they didn't think that Rubio would reveal that this happened, and he did. And J.D. Vance backed him up on it, saying, yeah, that's what happened. That brings us to this story. The government of Ukraine, not Zelensky specifically, the government of Ukraine confirmed yesterday that it is in the final stages of an agreement on selling rare earth minerals to America, a deal that Trump floated as a way for America to get a return on its investment in supporting Kiev against Russian invasion. The announcement of the final stage of a deal made by the Minister of Justice, Olha Stefaninski, followed comments by Zelensky in which he expressed hesitation about signing off on significant rights to Ukraine's plentiful rare earth minerals or in heavily indebted Ukrainians in the future. Zelensky's remarks after the turbulent week in which Trump disparaged Zelensky as a dictator and implied he should vacate the office led many in international media to conclude that Ukraine would ultimately decline any such agreement with Washington. The Ministry of Justice, however, insisted yesterday that the deal was not only still happening, but it was almost complete. So this is a very interesting breakaway from Zelensky's messaging and potentially signaling that people within the Ukrainian government are a little more interested in getting this thing to stop than Zelensky is, for whatever reasons, noble or otherwise. But these are all, once again, pretty positive signs. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed.
Well, I think the president would want it to end yesterday, right? He thinks already too many people have died. There's been too much destruction. By the way, I think everybody should be very happy that President Trump is a peace president. We have a president that wants to end war.
I do want to play one other bit of audio from Marco Rubio, and this is trying to really get the focus on what we're dealing with here in terms of Trump and how, you know, for all the talk and all the rhetoric, that what we are observing is the behavior of a peacetime president.
Well, I think the president would want it to end yesterday, right? He thinks already too many people have died. There's been too much destruction. By the way, I think everybody should be very happy that President Trump is a peace president. We have a president that wants to end wars, not start new ones. He wants to end human suffering, not exacerbate it or extend it. Now, that said, it's a conflict. It's a war. And it's going back and forth. We got to get them both to the table, starting with the Russians. So we met with them last week, and the basic question of that meeting was, are you interested in conflict or not? A lot of people don't know the answer to that. If you talk to some in Europe, they'll tell you that Putin is not interested in ending the war. They said they would be under the right conditions. We didn't discuss what those conditions were. So the next step now is to meet with them again at some point with the right group of people in the room and begin to outline what would it take for Russia to stop a war. And obviously we got to ask Ukraine the same question, because you can't stop a war unless both sides agree to it. So whether it takes days or weeks or what have you, we're going to begin that process. It may not work out, but why would anybody criticize President Trump for wanting to end a war that's cost billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of lives, and tremendous and ongoing human suffering?
Well, and of course, the answer to that is because it's Trump. And peace, stopping the killing of people, war, you know, none of that is really of any interest to the left unless, you know, like everything else, it can be used as a weapon. And in this case, the stopping of it. They do not want Trump. This is how honestly sick they are. They would rather see this war continue than deal with Trump taking credit for stopping it. You think about we don't, you and I, we don't live in a wartime. We don't deal with the actual repercussions of real life war. That's not something that you and I deal with. So it's easy to virtue signal one way or another on this stuff. But when you really realize that there are people that would rather this war continue than Trump, than to listen to him brag about ending it, that's a pretty dark thing. I also want to say just how refreshing and frankly kind of cool, I don't know, that doesn't feel like the right term, but it is, to have, I mean, Marco Rubio there, he's telling us everything that's going on. It's almost as if they're in the closed door briefing and then, we are the president and it's coming in and it's an update. It's like, all right, here's what happened. We met with the Russians. We told them, listen, nobody thinks you really want peace. They said they did, but, we're going to see. Next step is, we're going to talk about, okay, here are the conditions that we require. We're going to start from there, and then we're going to go over to talk to Zelensky. I mean, it's just laying it all out, telling us exactly what is going on, exactly what is happening. It's just such a remarkable way to carry out foreign policy and to see it thus far working. Yeah, it's nice spring-like weather for a lot of us. It just has that ability to want to coax us into having a nice cold one. Bradford Light available at many of the area Macadoodles, price cutters as well. And also Pineapple Life Coach, infused with exotic essence and ripe pineapples, maybe as you think about the next great escape, which hopefully we'll be announcing soon, or going on your own vacation, or you see friends. I know right now I have family in Cabo, and they've been posting all these pictures, and you just think, oh man, the ambiance, the atmosphere, the feeling of it all, how wonderful that would be. Well, Pineapple Life Coach can satisfy that for you until it is you do get to take your next trip. That also from Kansas Territory Brewing Company, which, just like Bradford Light, can be picked up at some area Macadoodles and price cutters. You can find out more about them all, of course, at none other than KansasTerritoryBrewingCo.com. And if your favorite place to pick up beer doesn't carry it, mention it to them, and maybe they will start carrying it for you. It just depends on how valuable you are as a customer, I suppose. Coming up Friday, mark your calendar. We've got a Heroes Breakfast. If you're a veteran, come by and get free breakfast with us from 6 to 9 on Friday. Also get signed up if you'd like. Register to win tickets to see Alabama live coming up just a couple months from now. That at KSGF.com.